On the 3rd of March 1943 dawn illuminated the Bismarck Sea approaches to Huon Gulf. A Japanese reinforcement convoy, 8 transports escorted by 8 destroyers, steamed toward Leh, carrying 6,900 troops of the 51st Division. Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa, Southeast Area Fleet, directed the operation. Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura commanded aboard destroyer Shirayuki. Allied air forces, led by Lieutenant General George C. Kenney 5th Air Force and Brigadier General Ennis Whitehead Advanced Operational Command tracked the convoy through Coastwatcher reports and aerial reconnaissance. Royal Australian Air Force, No. 9 Operational Group under Air Commodore Joe Hewitt, joined the interdiction. The number that matters is 1,600 miles B-25 range at 200 knots. Allied aircraft attacked in coordinated waves. B-17. Flying fortresses. 43rd Bombardment Group bombed from 6,000 feet, disrupting the convoy's tight formation. Beaufighters Royal Australian Air Force No. 30 Squadron surged at mast height, their 20mm cannons tearing into bridges and gun crews. B-25 Mitchells, 3rd Attack, and 38th Bombardment Groups followed at wave-top height skip bombing, with 500-pound bombs fitted with 5-second delay fuses. Avanti Havocs targeted escorts. Within 15 minutes, multiple transports burned, their decks shattered and destroyer screens wavered. Smoke rose in dense columns visible for miles. Japanese gunners, overwhelmed by the low-level assault, struggled to track the swift attackers. Engine overhaul required after 50 hours at full throttle. The convoy's unity collapsed as ships veered, dodging frantically. Destroyers tasked with anti-aircraft fire and rescue faced conflicting duties. Allied fighters patrolled overhead, deterring Japanese interceptors. The initial strike's intensity, concentrated multi-altitude, relentless, paved the way for further waves. By late morning, the convoy was a broken chain of flaming hulls, and desperate maneuvers its mission to land troops at Leh in jeopardy. The Bismarck Sea, on the 3rd of March 1943, was a crucible of the Southwest Pacific area's grinding campaign. Japan's hold on Leh and Salamaua, key outposts in New Guinea, anchored their defensive arc against Allied advances following the brutal Bunagona battles. These bases threatened Coral Sea supply lines vital for Australia and Allied staging. Japan's Operation 81 aimed to reinforce Leh with 6,900 troops of the 51st Division, carried by 8 transports and guarded by 8 destroyers from Rabaul. Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa, Southeast Area Fleet, entrusted convoy command to Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura aboard Shirayuki. The number that matters is 1,600 miles, B-25 range, enabling strikes far from Allied airfields. Allied forces under Lieutenant General George C. Kenney's 5th Air Force sought to choke Japan's New Guinea foothold without risking surface fleets. Brigadier General Ennis Whitehead's Advanced Operational Command and Air Commodore Joe Hewitt's Royal Australian Air Force No. 9 Operational Group coordinated the response. Intelligence, coastwatcher sightings, aerial reconnaissance and decrypted radio traffic pinpointed the convoy's path. Kenney's aim was clear: destroy the convoy at sea, denying Leh's reinforcement. This required precise integration of air assets from high-altitude bombers to low-level strafers to overwhelm the convoy's defenses. The constraint was timing strike windows narrowed by weather and convoy speed. Japan's convoy, steaming at 12 knots, relied on destroyer screens and anti-aircraft fire to deter air attacks. Mikawa's staff assumed daylight runs. With 8 destroyers, combined firepower could protect transports long enough to reach Leh. Destroyers, armed with 5-inch guns and 25mm mounts, formed a tight cordon. Transports laden with troops and materiel maintained close formation to maximize defensive overlap. Japanese planners, aware of Allied air strength, banked on speed and cohesion to limit exposure. Yet Allied intelligence had already unraveled their course, setting a trap in the Huon Gulf approaches. Reconnaissance flights logged positions daily, feeding Kenney's strike plans. Allied air doctrine, honed in late 1942, emphasized combined arms airstrikes. B-17 flying fortresses would disrupt from 6,000 feet, forcing evasive maneuvers. Beaufighters with 20mm cannons would suppress deck guns at mast height. B-25 Mitchells and A-20 Havocks, using skip bombing, would target hulls with 500-pound bombs. Fighter escorts, including P-38 Lightnings, would shield the attackers from Japanese interceptors. This layered approach demanded exact timing strikes must hit before the convoy neared Lay's coastal defences. Fuel reserves capped at 8 hours for B-25 seconds at full load. Japanese commanders aboard Shirayuki maintained strict radio discipline, wary of Allied codebreakers. Kimura, a veteran of destroyer operations, prioritized formation integrity, ordering transports to hold course despite sightings of Allied scout planes. His destroyers, including Tokitsukaze and Arashio, patrolled aggressively, their crews drilling for air raids. Anti-aircraft gunners manning 25mm triple mounts trained to track fast, low targets. Yet the convoy's size, 16 vessels, stretched coordination. Transports slower and less maneuverable struggled to match destroyer evasions. Mikawa, in Rabaul, monitored reports expecting losses, but confident in partial success. Allied preparations intensified. Kenney's staff at Port Moresby finalized strike packages. Whitehead's forward bases, including Dobodura, staged aircraft for rapid turnaround. Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighters, based on lessons from coastal raids, practiced low-level runs. B-25 crews, trained on skip bombing, rehearsed against wreck targets, aiming for 1 or 2 skips before hull impact. The constraint was ammunition. B-25 seconds carried 8 500-pound bombs per sortie. Kenney demanded maximum effect in the first wave, knowing follow-on strikes depended on initial disruption. As the convoy neared Huon Gulf, Allied reconnaissance tightened the noose. Coast watchers, hidden on New Britain's shores, radioed updates on ship types and speeds. B-17 seconds launching pre-dawn confirmed positions, dropping 1,000-pound bombs to test defences. Japanese gunners responded, revealing mount positions. These probes fed Whitehead's tactical adjustments, ensuring Beaufighters led the main assault. The stage was set for a 15-minute onslaught, designed to fracture the convoy's spine. Japanese lookouts scanning horizons missed the low-flying Beaufighters until cannons flashed. Maintenance cycle reset after 20 sorties per airframe. The stakes were stark. For Japan, Lay's reinforcement was critical to holding New Guinea against Allied ground offensives. For the Allies, sinking the convoy would prove air power's dominance over sea lanes, preserving momentum toward Rabaul. Both sides knew the Bismarck Sea could shift the theatre's balance. As dawn faded, the convoy steamed into a maelstrom, unaware of the precision awaiting them. The morning of the 3rd of March, 1943, saw the Bismarck Sea churn under a low overcast, the Japanese convoy steaming toward Leh. 8 transports heavy, with 6,900 troops, clung to formation screened by 8 destroyers. Allied aircraft staged from Dobodura and Port Moresby launched at dawn, their plan a meticulously timed sequence. B-17, Flying Fortress's 43rd Bombardment Group climbed to 6,000 feet, their 1,000-pound bombs aimed to scatter the convoy's order. The number that matters is 1,000 ALA, 600 miles B-25 range, reaching deep into contested waters. The attack began with B-17 seconds diving through cloud breaks, releasing salvos that erupted in towering geysers among the transports. Ships veered their tight formation, fraying as captains sought to dodge. Destroyers, including Shirayuki and Tokitsukaze, fired 5-inch guns skyward, their 25mm mounts tracking the high bombers. The disruption worked transports now misaligned, exposed gaps in the destroyer screen. Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighters No. 30 Squadron followed, skimming 10 feet above, waves their 20mm cannons blazing. They targeted bridges and gun crews, shredding control stations and silencing anti-aircraft mounts. Splinters and smoke choked the decks as Japanese gunners ducked under the onslaught. B-25 Mitchell's 3rd attack and 38th Bombardment Groups roared in next, hugging the sea at 50 feet. Their solid noses, bristling with 850 caliber machine guns, raked transport decks to suppress return fire. Pilots trained for skip bombing released 500-pound bombs with 5-second delay fuses, watching them skip once or twice before slamming hulls below waterlines. A-20 Havocks joined their lighter 300-pound bombs targeting destroyer superstructures. Within 15 minutes, 3 transports burned fiercely, their cargoes of fuel and munitions igniting in rolling fireballs. Destroyer Arashio, caught in a bomb's blast, listed heavily, its steering jammed. Fuel lines inspected after 10 hours at maximum thrust. Japanese crews aboard Shirayuki watched in stunned horror as Beaufighters tore through their formation cannons, flashing in relentless passes. Allied planes strike too low, our guns cannot depress. A gunnery officer shouted, his voice lost in the roar of engines and explosions. The convoy's disciplined advance dissolved into chaos, ships turning wildly to avoid bombs mistaken for torpedoes. Destroyers, tasked with screening, struggled to maintain position, their anti-aircraft fire sporadic as crews fell to strafing runs. Transports, their bridges wrecked, drifted without command, easy prey for the next wave. Allied coordination was relentless. P-38 Lightning escorts circled at 10,000 feet, deterring Japanese fighters from Rabaul. Beaufighter pilots completing runs banked sharply to egress, avoiding their own bombs' blasts. B-25 crews, disciplined by months of training, maintained tight intervals, ensuring bombs struck before ships could recover. The initial strike's precision, combining high-altitude disruption with low-level destruction, cracked the convoy's spine. Smoke obscured visibility, complicating Japanese efforts to reorganize. Destroyers attempting to rescue troops from sinking transports exposed themselves to further attacks, their maneuvers hampered by debris and oil slicks. The assault's speed overwhelmed Japanese defenses. Transports designed for troop delivery lacked the armor to withstand 500-pound bombs. Destroyers, though agile, could not shield 16 vessels against a multi-axis attack. Allied planners under Lieutenant General George C. Kenney had anticipated this timing strikes to exploit the convoy's daylight exposure. Coastwatcher reports detailing ship counts and speeds ensured aircraft hit at peak vulnerability. The 15-minute window left 4 transports sinking, and 2 destroyers crippled their crews fighting fires amid shattered decks. As the first wave withdrew, Allied pilots radioed damage assessments, confirming hits on critical targets. Transports, now scattered across miles, burned or listed their troops trapped below decks or clinging to wreckage. Destroyers prioritizing rescue slowed, becoming static targets. The convoy's mission to land reinforcements at Leh was unraveling its cohesion, shattered by the Allies' layered assault. Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura aboard Shirayuki issued urgent orders to regroup, but the next wave loomed, promising no respite. The morning's violence set a grim tone, proving air power's dominance over unprepared sea convoys. The 3rd of March, 1943 Bismarck Sea became a cauldron of fire and steel. The Japanese convoy, battered by Allied airstrikes, fought to survive. On destroyer Shirayuki, Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura stood on the bridge, directing evasive maneuvers as Beaufighters tore through. A B-25 Mitchell, skimming at 50 feet, unleashed 50 caliber fire, shredding the bridge. A 500-pound bomb detonated nearby, splitting Shirayuki's hull. Kimura, wounded by shrapnel, transferred command to destroyer Shikinami under strafing runs. His orders barked amid smoke and screams. The number that matters is 1,600 miles, B-25, range striking far from Allied bases. Allied B-25 pilots' 3rd Attack Group described wave-top approaches, engines roaring at 200 knots. They fired 8 50-caliber guns to silence deck weapons, then released 500-pound bombs, watching them skip across waves to strike transport hulls. One pilot noted, a transport's deck erupt in flames, its anti-aircraft guns falling silent after a single pass. Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighter crews, No. 30 Squadron reported head-on, runs their 20mm cannons raking bridges. Japanese gunners caught in open mounts collapsed as bullets tore through. Ships veered, mistaking bombs for torpedoes, their formations crumbling. On Japanese transports, chaos reigned. Sailors and troops, 6,900 packed below decks, faced infernos as bombs pierced hulls. One transport, its fuel stores ignited, exploded, hurling debris skyward. Survivors leaped into oil-slicked waters, only to face strafing from low-flying A-20 Havocs. Destroyers, including Arashio, turned to rescue their 5-inch guns, firing sporadically. Arashio collided with transport Nojima in the smoke, its bow crumpled, leaving both vessels dead in the water. Japanese crews cursed Allied planes too low for guns to track. "Their speed blinds us," a destroyer lookout shouted, his voice drowned by cannon fire. Allied pilots pressed their advantage. B-25 crews trained for precision maintained tight formations, ensuring bombs hit before ships could react. Beaufighter pilots banking after runs saw transports listing their decks awash with fire and bodies. The human toll was stark. Japanese sailors untrained for such assaults struggled to man guns or launch lifeboats. Destroyers attempting rescue slowed, exposing themselves to bombs. Kimura, now on Shikinami, radioed for air cover, but Rabal's fighters were too distant. Allied P-38 lightnings overhead ensured no relief arrived. The 15-minute melee left transports burning their troops trapped or drowning. Destroyer crews hauling survivors aboard faced A-20 runs targeting their exposed decks. The convoy's mission to land at Leh faltered as ships sank or drifted. Allied pilots radioing base reported crippled vessels and scattered formations, their voices calm despite the carnage below. Kimura's orders to regroup reached fewer ships, his command fracturing under relentless strikes. Ammunition resupply needed after 10 sorties per aircraft. The human cost mounted. Japanese troops meant to reinforce Leh now clung to wreckage, their survival hinging on destroyer rescues. Allied crews bound by duty executed runs with mechanical precision aware, each bomb tightened the noose. The sea littered with debris and oil bore witness to a convoy's unraveling, its defenders outmatched by air power's ferocity. The 3rd of March 1943 Bismarck Sea showcased Allied air tactics refined to lethal precision. The Japanese convoy, its transports and destroyers reeling from earlier strikes, faced a relentless onslaught, driven by skip bombing and mast-height attacks. These techniques, developed in late 1942 by 5th Air Force and Royal Australian Air Force crews, transformed B-25 Mitchells into ship killers. Major Paul Pappy Gunn, a 5th Air Force innovator, modified B-25 seconds into Strafers fitting solid noses with 850 caliber machine guns and cheek mounts for deck suppression. The number that matters is 1,600 miles B-25, range enabling strikes deep into enemy waters. Skip bombing demanded exacting skill. B-25 pilots' 3rd attack and 38th Bombardment Groups approached at 50 feet, engines at 200 knots. They fired 50 caliber guns to silence anti-aircraft mounts, then released 500-pound bombs with 5-second delay fuses. Bombs skipped once or twice across waves, striking hulls below waterlines where armor was thinnest. Training against wreck targets off New Guinea honed this method, ensuring bombs detonated inside ships for maximum damage. A-20 Havocs carrying 300-pound bombs, complemented with mast-height drops, targeting destroyer superstructures. Bomb fuses recalibrated after 20 sorties. Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighters No. 30 Squadron led with 20mm cannon runs at 10 feet, shredding bridges and gun crews. Their roll suppression cleared paths for bombers by neutralizing fire control. Allied coordination under Lieutenant General George C. Kenney synchronized these elements. B-17 Flying Fortresses, bombing from 6,000 feet, scattered the convoy, forcing evasive turns that exposed ships to low-level strikes. P-38 Lightning escorts at 10,000 feet deterred Japanese fighters, ensuring uninterrupted runs. This layered assault, planned via Coastwatcher and reconnaissance data, hit the convoy at its most vulnerable, 15 miles off Leh. Japanese defenses designed for torpedo or high-altitude threats faltered. Destroyers' 5-inch guns and 25mm mounts could not depress low enough to track Beaufighters or B-25 seconds. Transports packed with 6,900 troops lacked armor against hull-piercing bombs. Japanese crews, expecting conventional attacks, misread skip-bombing runs as torpedo launches, turning broadside and exposing larger targets. Allied planes hug the sea. "Our guns are useless," a destroyer officer yelled, his crew scrambling as bombs skipped closer. The 15-minute initial strike crippled 4 transports, their decks aflame, and damaged 2 destroyers, their steering wrecked. Allied platform adaptations amplified the effect. B-25 strafers with forward-firing guns suppressed decks in seconds, allowing precise bomb placement. Beaufighters with 4 20mm cannons delivered concentrated fire, collapsing command structures. Training emphasized disciplined egress. Pilots banked sharply post-release to avoid blast radii. The convoy's tight formation meant to maximize anti-aircraft overlap, backfired as bombs and strafing hit multiple ships in single passes. Smoke and oil slicks spreading from burning transports hampered Japanese gunners' visibility, easing follow-on strikes. The result was devastating. Within 15 minutes, the convoy lost cohesion, its transports burning or sinking, destroyers struggling to rescue survivors. Allied crews logging damage reports confirmed hits on critical targets, setting up later waves. Kenney's doctrine, integrating high-altitude disruption, low-level suppression, and precise bombing, proved air power could dismantle sea convoys without surface ships. The Japanese, unprepared for such tactics, saw their layer reinforcement plan unravel, their ships reduced to wreckage under a merciless sky. On the 3rd of March 1943, the Bismarck Sea became a graveyard for Japan's lay-bound convoy. The Japanese, expecting to run the daylight gauntlet with 8 transports and 8 destroyers, banked on speed and firepower. Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa and Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura assumed tight formations, and 25mm anti-aircraft guns would deter Allied airstrikes. This belief shattered as Allied B-25 seconds, Beaufighters and B-17 seconds executed a 15-minute maelstrom, sinking 4 transports and crippling 2 destroyers. The number that matters is 1,600 miles, B-25 range, enabling relentless strikes. The convoy's cohesion dissolved under layered assaults. B-17 seconds, bombing from 6,000 feet, forced ships to scatter. Beaufighters at 10 feet silenced gun crews with 20mm cannons. B-25 seconds, skip bombing at 50 feet, sank transports with 500-pound bombs. Japanese destroyers, including Shirayuki, faltered. Shirayuki sank after a bomb split its hull. Tokitsukaze and Arashio followed Arashio, colliding with transport Nojima amid smoke. Asashio struck during rescue on the 4th, sank under A-20 Havoc bombs. Allied planes strike too fast, our screens are broken, a Shikanami officer cursed watching transports burn. All 8 transports sank, their 6,900 troops decimated. Approximately 2,890 perished. 1,200 reached Leh via destroyer lifts, and 2,700 were evacuated toward Rabaul. The convoy's mission to reinforce Leh failed utterly, its wreckage strewn across Huon Gulf. Destroyers slowed by rescue became targets for later waves. Bomb racks reloaded after 6 sorties per aircraft. Japan's assumption that a reinforced convoy could withstand air attacks collapsed, forcing a shift to barges and submarines for New Guinea supply. Allied precision, guided by coast watchers and reconnaissance, exploited the convoy's daylight exposure. Lieutenant General George C. Kenney's tactics, integrating high-altitude disruption with low-level destruction, proved air power's dominance. The defeat compelled Japan to abandon large ship runs, reshaping their strategy. The convoy's annihilation, completed by the 4th, marked a tactical inflection, demonstrating that no surface force could evade coordinated air interdiction in the Southwest Pacific. By nightfall on the 3rd of March 1943, the Bismarck Sea was a debris field, the Japanese convoy's remnants smoldering. Allied aircraft and PT boats harried survivors through the night, targeting lifeboats and barges. On the 4th dawn, strikes by B-25 Mitchells and A-20 Havocs sank stragglers, including destroyer Asashio, during rescue. All 8 transports and 4 destroyers, Shirayuki Tokitsukaze, Arashio Asashio, Leh wrecked their mission to land 6,900 troops at Leh obliterated. The number that matters is 1,600 miles, B-25 range, enabling sustained interdiction. Japan's Southeast Area Fleet, under Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa, abandoned large ship reinforcement to Leh. Barge traffic and night runs increased, but coastwatcher networks and Allied reconnaissance kept them vulnerable. The convoy's loss, 2,890, killed 1,200, landed crippled Japan's New Guinea defences, starving ground forces of supplies. Allied air tactics codified by Lieutenant General George C. Kenney accelerated adoption of B-25 strafers with 850 caliber guns and skip bombing drills. Airframe inspections required after 30 sorties. The battle proved land-based air power could dominate sea lanes without surface fleets. B-17 seconds Beaufighters and B-25 seconds coordinated via intelligence, dismantled a fortified convoy, shifting the Southwest Pacific's balance. Japan's reliance on small craft stretched their logistics, while Allied interdictions across Huon Gulf intensified. Lay's isolation weakened Japan's hold, paving the way for Allied offensives toward Rabaul. The Bismarck Sea became a testament to tactical evolution, its lessons shaping air campaigns thereafter.